There's an email that I get sometimes, often out of the blue, or a conversation that I have maybe at a retreat when we have dokusan, and it's some variation of either how do I become your student, or I think maybe I'm your student. What do I do with that? And I'm aware as I'm talking, there are people who, in this group tonight, there are people with whom I've had that conversation. So some of you know what I say next. Some of you don't. And I thought it might be beneficial to just talk about it as a group. I always say something like this. First of all, that's really beautiful. It's beautiful to come to this practice and then see a kind of a door and say, I want to go through that door too. And of course, because this is about forming some sort of relationship with me, or establishing that relationship or defining that relationship, I'm also just very touched. Because something that has just been in the air is becoming explicit. I feel that. But what I tell people is, if you identify as my student, that can be good. But also, nothing's really going to change. I don't have a special thing to give. I don't have a curriculum. I don't have a next step. My understanding of this role of student is about staying very, very close. And so what I tell people is, if you want to be my student, if you want to explore what it is to be a student of a teacher, practice with me as much as you can. Get as close to me as you can. If I've written things, read them. If I've said things, listen to them. And when I sit, and if you can join me, whether it's in this room or whether it's in your own room. There's a word for this, zuishi. And it's used in a more of a monastic context where someone becomes a priest's student and then becomes their attendant and then just stays with them for years, because the goal is to be in the room with them as much as possible. Not to ask them questions necessarily, not to get any secret something, but because you look at that person and you think there's something there that I wish would rub off on me. And maybe if I hang out long enough, I'll absorb something. Togan talked about this like walking through the mist. You walk through the mist and eventually you become soaked. You don't know it while it's happening. It just happens. So I wanted to unpack a little bit this idea of being a student. And of course, you can't talk about that without unpacking being a teacher, because there are a lot of ideas about what this means. I'm speaking from the tradition I come from and the way that I inherited this and the way that I understand it, the part of this that feels the most profound to me. But I know when I speak with peers, with fellow priests who are working in other communities, some of them, I think, see this exactly the way I do. And some of them see it in a very different way. Some of that is really deeply informed by other traditions as well. Rinzai, for example, where forming a relationship with a teacher means that you're establishing a curriculum, right? You're saying, take me through something. Take me from A to B to C, hopefully all the way to the end. And in asking for that, you're kind of agreeing to something. You're saying, if you will agree to take me through this, I will agree to do what you say I have to do to get through this. There's a kind of contract that's made. That relationship can be carried to its extreme, very intense, where there's a tremendous amount of power. The power dynamic is like this. And I confess part of my own choice not to follow that is because I find that kind of terrifying. I know, partly because I'm just in this world, partly because I worked at a Buddhist magazine for years. And so I heard every single story that came in. I know that establishing that power relationship between teacher and student is incredibly dangerous. It doesn't have to be harmful. And I have deep admiration for people who hold that with maturity and care. But I also don't trust that most people can. And I think history has shown that many people shouldn't have. And it turns into a kind of game. So part of me is just so cautious about creating something that might take on its own frightening life. But more than that, that just isn't my experience. That isn't my experience of what this relationship is. It isn't my experience of how my teachers went through this relationship or their teachers. Because in this tradition, that's not what it looks like. And if it ever did, it was centuries ago. And we should distinguish here because there are different tracks. There's what I'm calling a student, which in my mind is, if we go back to the time of the Buddha, anybody could be the Buddha's student. Lay people could come and they could listen and they could say, I'm a student of the Buddha, meaning I'm a Buddhist, right? And then there were the disciples of the Buddha. And those people arrived and they said, I want to ordain, I want to follow this path, I want to do what you say to do. We have that too, of course. And if someone comes to me and says, I want to ordain, I want to become a priest, I want to be your disciple in that way, well, now there is a curriculum. Not in the way that we might kind of hope for in this mystical religious world where I would then lead someone to be a particular kind of person or create containers for them in which they have particular insights that I can then verify. But actually just training them to be a priest so that they understand how to hold that role. And at the beginning, that curriculum is very technical. You have to be able to learn how to stand like this and how to dress like this and how to move like this. And then eventually, because there are levels of ordination, it's not that you have to be a particular kind of person, but you have to have a certain kind of maturity. Because at some stage, you are handed a certain amount of power. And you have to decide how you're going to use that. Understanding that that person could go to another community and they could decide, I actually want to do this teacher-student thing in a really different way. I want to make it really intense. I would have to trust that that person was ready to make those decisions. So that's a much more defined path. It's much narrower. But for a student of Zen, who might also identify as a student of a teacher, the curriculum is to live according to vow. That's what we do. That's all we're asked to do. And I've said over and over again, I can't tell you how to do that. I don't want to tell you how to do that. When I see you, if you come to me in a one-on-one way, let me pause. Because before I say that, I want to say this. It's really fun for me to get to know you. I like it. Whether it's, a couple in the 12 years we've been doing this, there have been a couple of potlucks, for example. And I get to sit there and eat a sandwich and talk to someone and find out where they were born. We get to connect in that way, in that basic way. I love it. And I've had conversations with quite a few of you online at different times. And even if we're talking about something specific, we make a little space for this other part. I love that part. But when we meet in that way, we're just two Zen practitioners meeting. That's not a teacher meeting a student. I just really like you. And I like that we share this. We have such a weird, beautiful thing in common from the beginning of the conversation. And I love it. And so I find out about your pets. I love that. But there are these other contexts where we meet, if not as teacher and student, in a way that is explicitly and exclusively about this practice. And in those meetings, my understanding of my role is to see you as a bodhisattva. And to reassure you in whatever way I can that I'm not kidding about that. That I see and I trust your capacity to hold this practice as it's being offered. Because I know you don't see yourself that way. I know you don't trust yourself that way. Because I know myself. And I know how hard it is to hold all this. I want us to meet bodhisattva to bodhisattva. I would like that to be my meeting with everyone, everywhere, all the time. But I know there's some moments, things like Doksan, that create a space for that. Where maybe you know that's what we're doing, and I know that's what we're doing. And it doesn't have to be secondary. It's the thing that's right up front. To be a student of Zen can take a lot of different forms. There are people who, and I'm going through so many faces as we talk, there are people who come to Dokusan almost every time they have a chance who do not see me as their teacher. There are people who never come to Dokusan, even when they do have a chance, and they do see me as their teacher. There are people in this community who have told me that they really see this community as their teacher. I think that's beautiful. That works for me. There are people in this community who don't even think of themselves as Zen practitioners, but there's something here that's authentic for them, that they want to stay in touch with, that they want to deepen somehow. There are people here who come every time, and there are people here who haven't been here in years. In my mind, you're all always here. I know as I'm talking about this, because I'm going down, there's more to say. There's more to say, I think, about what this practice offers, where it might go, which ties into why someone would try to open this door and this door and this door. And I want to talk about all those things, but they almost feel like a whole new huge conversation. So what I'd rather do, I think, is stop here right now and open it up so that we can have a little bit of a conversation about this part.